A very good afternoon to everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of What's Up Startup. Today we have with us Mr. Chinmoy Mishra as our guest. He's the founder and CEO of Hooliv, a startup which intends to provide students across the country with hassle-free affordable housing options. So on the behalf of the entire team of Entrepreneurship Cell of Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, I would like to extend you a very warm welcome, sir. Thank you so much for being here. We are absolutely excited to have you here and hear about your entrepreneurial journey. Without any further ado, let's start with this session. So, sir, could you please tell us more about Hooliv and how did you realize about the market gap? I mean, was there any particular incident which made you realize that, yes, there's a need for Hooliv in the market?
Sure. So I would say there were a few different things which came together when we were starting Hooliv. Like all of you guys, we've all been through that phases of our life where we have stayed in student hostels, in dormitories and stuff. And so we know what kind of challenges typically a student faces, right, when we're staying in some of these hostels. And especially if you look at the market that we are targeting, slightly more the non-metros, the tier 2, tier 3 cities of India. When you look at some of the student accommodations in those towns and cities, I mean, for lack of a better word, it's very pitiable. The conditions are very unhygienic. There is a lack of privacy. The amenities are not, that great. The safety and security is a concern. So there are so many problems, right? So we felt that there could be a great way to actually make a difference to the quality of life in a student. When we are leaving our homes for the first time, we are pretty young. We, stepping outside of our homes, we do not have many friends and families in that particular town, maybe, or in a city. So, in a way, our accommodation becomes our home, right? And the people that we are sharing our rooms with or sharing our facility with, they become our family members, So anything that we can do to enhance that quality of life, I think that's something that we are targeting on Ayushi. And the second thing also, you won't believe when we started Hooliv, we were actually focused on a very different segment. We thought of starting something like a daycare for the elderly segment. Right. So we felt that, in India, if you look at the elderly population, the retirees, if I may say, so there is only, you have two segments. One could be your poorly run nursing homes, right, where we would never send our parents or ask our parents to go. And the other segment could be very high end, like an Ambi Valley, or, there are certain townships which are dedicated to retirees where you buy a house, you spend a few crores and your parents are staying there and stuff. So there's nothing in between. So we had actually conceptualized it, thought of why don't we create like a daycare center for the elderly? So we pick them up in the morning, then they spend the rest of the day doing what they love doing, and the evening we drop them back. Right. So that was the whole concept that we actually started with. And then maybe after, doing a bit of market research, we realized that maybe we're slightly ahead of the market for an Indian, scenario. Even ourselves personally, I don't think we are that much willing to let our parents, elderly parents, go to some other place, and stay with unknown people. So there is still a bit of, you could say, skepticism or taboo associated with that, letting our parents go somewhere. It's always the societal structure is in a way that we always feel we should be taking care of our parents and elderlies in our home, giving them the best comfort, and that's how it should be. So I think we felt we were slightly ahead of the time. And then slowly, we kind of, you could say, made a detour towards the student accommodation and so on. And then we did a lot of survey in North Campus in Delhi. If you're aware of that, it's a huge student accommodation segment, yes, right? Sir. So we did a lot of survey there, and we realized that, there is a big gap. And that's how you could say the genesis of Hooliv, came about.
So how did you find the right people for your startup?
We Ayushi go a long way back. Actually, we have 4 founding partners in Hooliv, and this is our second venture, in fact. So we started our first venture way back in 2013. And that point in time, among the 4 partners, one is my elder sister, Dr. Rashmi. So she is based out of Pune. So the two of us, when the first venture we were starting, the two of us, we got together, and I come from a very hardcore, you could say, healthcare, business development, consulting background. And she has a PhD in artificial intelligence and stuff. So she came in with a very tech background, right? But neither of us could code. We didn't know how to code. So we said, why don't we look for a co-founder who is actually more hands-on? So that's how we got our third partner, the CIO, Mr. Gaurav. And then we were looking for good people to kind of help us with the strategy, business development. And we came across our fourth partner, Mr. Abhishek, through a friend. He was a friend of, he was a friend of our friend. So we got a fourth partner. He's from IIM Calcutta. And so we got him over. So the four of us, we started the first venture way back in 2013. Right, I'll come back to that story later. But in Hooliv, again, it's the same founding team, the four of us. Okay? And then incidentally, Ayushi, we realized that while we are coming from a very entrepreneurial background, a technology background, what we lacked was people with skills in the real estate or the hospitality side, because Hooliv is all about hospitality and real estate, right? So we made a very conscious effort to hire a few people who were from that background. So just before the pandemic, the lockdown, Oyo was letting go a lot of people, right? So we picked up 4, in fact, who were let go by Oyo, who had reached out to us, who had lost their jobs that time. So we picked them up, brilliant guys. So we picked them up. Apart from the 4, we had those 4. So we were 8 during the whole pandemic. And now I think these guys have hired 3 more people. So in all, we are 11. And but the core team, the founding team, is still the same from our previous venture. And that to me is my biggest asset.
Wow, that was really interesting, sir. That was really great.
Sure.
So we all know that being an entrepreneur is not easy. So what was the biggest challenge that you faced at the time of starting Hooliv?
There are many things. Hooliv anyway. Ayushi was our second venture, right? So in the first venture, we had lots of ups and downs and a lot of learnings. So maybe a better way to answer that would be, what was our mindset, or how did we start our first venture? That would give you a better glimpse, because that was our first foray into the whole entrepreneurial world, right? I think what came about very well for us, Ayushi, and that's something that I tell a lot of people who look at starting up or who are on the brink of starting something on their own. There are a couple of fundamental things I always follow. One is that I always look for people who are way better than me. My team, Dr. Rashmi, Gaurav, and Abhishek, I feel in terms of their competency, their abilities, they're way ahead of me. If Dr. Rashmi has a terrible, you could say, way of forcing us to get things done, but at the end of the day, we realize that she has got it done. And I could be very kamikaze, I could be very, you could say, risk taking and stuff, but she brings in a balancing factor, right? And the other thing which also happens is, because she's my sister, we could be tearing each other's hair apart during our professional lives and having a big fight and everything, argument, and half an hour later she would call me and say, hey, did you have your lunch yet or not? Because that's where the brother and sister bond comes in, right? And similarly with the other 2, I think that gelled very well. But if I look at the way that we started, that is one fundamental thing, that I always look to hire people who are better than me. And the second thing, which I learned during my master's also, is a very wonderful concept. They talk about something which they call as situational leadership. I'll give you a small example for that. When I was doing my master's in Boston, we used to have these group activities, right? Like you guys must be having the group work. So in our group, during the first time, first day of our master's, when we were introducing each other, there was one girl in our group, and she said that I write speech for senators, right? She was a speech writer. So, coming from India with it, we had a chip on our shoulder, like, oh, we are a technology background, we are so good in maths, we're analytical, so and so. So my first reaction to that was a bit of condensation. Like, what is a speechwriter doing here? That's what my, the first reaction was. And you won't believe, Ayushi, after that, anytime we had a group work to be done, we would just dump our stuff on a paper, send it to her. And the next morning she would turn over the paper and we would look at it and we were like, is this what I wrote? And she would have made it so beautiful, so presentable, right? And that's when you start realizing that each and every one of us is a leader in some or the other aspect, and we cannot be good in every field. There are certain situations where my partner needs to take the lead and be the leader. In some other situations, somebody else might. So there's always this situational leadership thing. And I think as startup people, we get so caught up in our own egos, our own way of, this whole make-believe world that I am the one who is driving everything. I need to drive everything. That situational leadership concept gets lost in a lot of times. It says like, oh, it's my baby, I started it, so I should be the one calling the shots. But it doesn't happen that way. Everyone has something different to bring to the table, and they could lead in some of the other ways. So I think that's the second concept that I learned. And the third, and slightly more, you could say, on a personal note, when you look at the entrepreneurial world, when you look at a lot of people talking, you listen to entrepreneurs and all, always there's a talk about how much sacrifices the entrepreneurs make, right? That, entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, you're leaving behind your jobs, you're leaving behind certainty to, get into an uncertain path. But having been an entrepreneur, I wish, for the last 8-9 years, what I've realized is the one who makes the greater sacrifices are actually your family members. They are the ones who are kind of putting aside their dreams to see you fulfill yours, right? And only those people who love you unconditionally, they would do that sacrifice. So while as entrepreneurs we take all the limelight and everything, but they are the ones who are actually our backbone. They're all on Facebooks, they're all on Instagrams, they're seeing their friends vacationing in Hawaii and stuff, and here we are, fighting it out for our daily bread and butter. So that's not an easy sacrifice to do. So in this journey, I mean, the one thing that teaches you, Ayushi, is it makes you very humble. It brings humility to you. It makes you appreciative of things that people have done, and it makes you believe in the whole thing that businesses may fail, businesses may succeed, but an entrepreneur never fails. It's more crucial to take the first step than it is to cross the finishing line. That first step is a leap of faith, which not many do. But this is a support system you need. These are some of the structural things you need in place in terms of situational leadership, in terms of hiring the right people, better people. These are all, I think, during the course of the time, actually one gets to learn in a hard way, but it makes you a better person, by the end of it. So
Yes, sir.
I
Definitely.
hope that answers your.
Yes, sir, that was a fully fledged answer. And
Thank you.
that was quite, relatable. And you well said about that. Family members are the one who are
Absolutely.
actually the main major supporters in the whole
Absolutely.
journey. Yes.
Absolutely.
So, since you mentioned that you learned a lot from MBA and you applied the things in your startup, so
Yeah.
since you also mentioned about your previous startup, so what all things did you think you learned in your previous startup which were really important and which proved to be of really help in this current
Sure.
startup
Sure.
of yours?
Absolutely. Actually, there are two ways to look at it. From our learnings, I could bracket it into two segments. One is something which is more, you could say, quantifiable, or on the hard skills side. I think when we started off our first venture, we were very naive with regards to, say, the regulatory environments, with regards to the legal frameworks, the legal environments. So a lot of our contracts were very loose. When we initially started, we could get a template from the web and customize and send it to our client, and we did run into problems because of that. Some of the cases where we wanted to enforce a certain clause, but just because the way the whole agreement was, we weren't in a position to enforce it. We didn't have a proper legal way, and a lot of times we also missed out on our, say, tax filings or regulatory filings and stuff. So we ran into some of those problems. And being first-time entrepreneurs, we were not aware of these things, and you get caught up so much in terms of driving your venture that you miss out on these things, the regulatory sides, the statutory sides and stuff. So in the second venture, before even we had the ball rolling, we said, let's first get a good CA firm. So we have a very good CA partner. We have completely outsourced our regulatory work to them. We have a good legal firm that we have. So they take care of all our contracts, even from an NDA to a bigger contract, everything passes through their eyes. So these are some of the basic hygienes that we learned, or you could say we learned the hard way during our first venture. So we tried to set it correct. On the softer side, you could say, again, going back to my MBA days, actually, we used to, one of our professors used to tell us that make ambiguity your best friend. And we could never understand it during that time, that what is the meaning of making ambiguity your best friend. We could never relate to that. But once we started in our own venture, when you start, we all have very elaborate plans, right? We have spreadsheets which shows 100 crore company in 5 years. We have EBITDA positive, we have everything, right? But I think it was I think Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson who had said very rightly that you have a plan in place till the time you get punched on your nose, right? Then all plans go away. So, so I think that is exactly what happens. So when you are in a startup journey, there are so many ups and downs. There are so many uncertainties. that a lot of times you go to bed and you just wish that there is no tomorrow. You bury yourself in your pillow and say, "Kal nahi hona chahiye," I'm done. But then the next morning you somehow get their whole reservoir of energy and you say, convince yourself that today is going to be different, and you get back to work, right? But then what happens, Ayush, is gradually you see that it's very futile to plan for 3 years or 5 years in a startup environment, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next day. You don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 hours, in the next hour, which client is going to come back with what, which investor is going to tell you what, board of directors may ask you for something. So it is so uncertain, right? And that is when you start realizing that things are so ambiguous that you cannot fight them. You cannot, all the time try to make it a structured way that this is how I'm going to work, right? And that is when you slowly start making peace with ambiguity and say, ambiguity will be there. I have to live with it. So how do I deal with it? You learn to be better at making decisions. You learn to be better at, thinking on the spot. You are in a demo, your software stops working. What do you do there? You're a small startup, you're trying to build that trust more than anything. You're not a Microsoft or a Google who can get away by saying, no, the demo is failed, but rest of the things work, right? So it makes you, fighting, we realize gradually that there's no point in fighting ambiguity. You just can't plan, right? So then how do we kind of deal with it? So that becomes a very crucial aspect. Again, I assure anybody who's looking to start, my simple advice would be, don't fight it. You can't, right? So these were some of the tidbits we picked up along the way. And then, again, I think coming back to my earlier point about being humble, because what happens is when you're humble, you respect your competition. You don't put them down, you respect. And that's when you learn and grow, right? I remember a lot of times when I'm asked in maybe say investor presentations or even demos that, XYZ is doing the same thing. So how are you better than them? I think I came to a point where my simple answer used to be, I am not. I'm not better than them. I think maybe I'm more luckier because I am standing in front of you and they aren't. But I'm nowhere, better. My platform might be better in some aspects. Their platform might be better than me in certain other aspects. But the realization of that, Ayushi, comes only when you're humble enough to, appreciate that, that you can't be, the best in everything, right? So these are the things, Ayushi, you keep picking up as you go along. So,
and that was helps. A really, yes, sir. Thank you so much. That was a really, different perspective towards things, and it was quite inspiring. So, sir, since we are well aware of this COVID situation and we all are facing problems during this situation, tough times, many startups had a hard time coping up with the situation. So, how did Hooliv managed in this scenario?
You could say, Ayushi, we were a bit fortunate in that because we completed our first round or the seed round of funding just before the lockdown. So we had the money in the bank, I think by mid of March, and I think 20th onwards, we had the lockdown. And we didn't have a big enough team, just 8 people. So we could manage through the funds that we had. We cut down on the salaries and stuff for a few months. Now it is restored, but we cut it down so that, we could sustain the tough period. For the properties that we had signed up, the student accommodations that we had signed up, we managed to convince the owners to delay the start of the payments by a few months. So I think we pushed it out almost to August or September. So that saved a lot of cost for us. So you could say, Ayushi, that being still early in this kind of helped us. But some of our peers who were already there in the market, I think unfortunately a lot of them had to fold up because they couldn't afford to pay the huge rentals. Imagine you are paying a 10 to 15 lakhs a month rentals with no income, right? So that not everybody can sustain that. So a lot of them had folded up. So I think we were just lucky. That's all that we were.
That was really fortunate, sir. So, sir, since you mentioned that in the beginning of the year you raised funds, so how are you using those funds to scale your operations? What is the plan?
Yeah, sure. So the plan, Ayushi, was that we, again, going back last year when we launched Hooliv, we knew that we had in us the ability to take something from an idea to an execution again. We have done it once very successfully. We could do it again. But then we realized that, in this business, there are 2 things which is required. One is that this is a very capital intensive space because when you're taking up a property, you need to invest to retrofit it, make it better, right? So it is capital intensive. And the second also is that you need to speak that real estate language, in terms of when you're negotiating with a property owner, when you're negotiating with a landowner, you need to speak that language. We didn't have either of that, right? So what we did is we looked out specifically for some strategic partner who came in with that real estate knowledge. Given that we had raised a lot of funds before, we had built very good karma, you could say, with our previous investors. We knew that raising funds for us was not a challenge, but filling this real estate gap was. So we looked at a strategic partner, and that's how we onboarded a group called Kolte Patil Developers. So Kolte Patil Developers, they are among the top 5 development group in India. They are a listed, public listed company and stuff. So they came in, and I think we started discussing with them 2019 towards November, December, and we closed the round in March, right? So we, that kind of, that funding helped us. So the way that we are utilizing that, Ayushi, is 2 ways now. One is, as I said, we are very focused on the tier 2, tier 3 cities. So we are using that essentially to pay the deposit amount. So it could be a 2-3 months deposit on a property. That's one. Secondly, when we take up a property, we have our own template or a checklist, you could say. So we have kind of a, you could say, a Starbucks or a Dunkin' kind of checklist that any Hooliv property anywhere in India you walk into, you instantly know that this is Hooliv, right? So we invest our own funds now through the investor money to kind of retrofit that building, improve the hygiene, security, provide better, drinking. I mean, some of those properties don't even have proper drinking water, so install Kent ROs and stuff. So improve those properties. So I think a lot goes in the capex, the capital expenditures, and the deposits. And these are the two major, you could say, spend on an operation side. And then obviously our corporate salaries and marketing aspects and stuff. So that is something that we are now beginning to invest a lot. Because we are hoping that colleges might resume soon. So these are the 2-3 channels. Actually, the whole idea is that currently we are running on a very asset light model. And when I say asset light, what we mean is we are taking up accommodations which were already running as student accommodations, right? So we are taking them up and then changing them. But maybe in a 6 to 8 months time, we are looking at raising a larger institutional round from, say, private equity guy or somebody. And then we get into building, constructing our own properties. So for example, in Meerut, we have currently 6 properties in Meerut, about 700 students. So the idea now is that we will build one of our own facilities, which have, say, 800 beds, so that we could move all those 700 beds, all the 700 students into one property. So we could build it as per our own specification. We could have a gymnasium. We could have a common space for people to get together and stuff. And our operating expenses will also be lower because we have to spend on one property rather than, there's a redundancy of resources, you could say, if we are managing 7 different properties, right? So that's the whole idea actually going forward, that maybe in 6 to 8 months, we get into more, you could say, build to suit is what we call in our language, build to suit properties. Right? That's one we are looking at. The other, what we have initiated is in talks with a lot of institutes to take over the operations and management of their entire hostels, right? Because typically in any institute, private institute, the hostels turn out to be cost centers for the institute. So what we are promising them is that, look, we will take it over, we will optimize costs, and we'll actually start generating some revenues and profits for you. So we're in talks with a lot of them. I think in Pune, we're about to close 2 large institutes that we will be taking over. So this is again something, new channel that could open up maybe in 6-8 months time.
That seems to be a great plan, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, it was quite informative. Thank you so much for that.
Appreciate it.
So, sir, what would you advise young entrepreneurs without a financial backing to raise up funds for their startup?
Mm-hmm. I think that again takes me actually back to my first startup, when we went for almost 2 to 3 years without any funding. And I think we didn't have any salaries. We took, just paid whatever we were earning, we were paying people that we had hired and without taking salaries ourselves and all. But one of the things we did realize, on my advice to everyone, I should be, as long as you can delay that fundraise, do that, right? Simply because the more and more you are putting in your own energy, your own, kind of capital into it, you become more frugal. You are weighing every dime that you are spending. So you are not spending, unnecessarily. You are weighing every dime. You believe in frugal innovation. You try to maximize your, the money that you have, because that's limited, right? And at the end, what happens is the product or the service that you build is actually the best in class, and that will attract the investors. And that is what happened with my previous venture. And at that point in time, when you are actually not out there for investment, but people are looking at you, you can get the maximum valuation, you can raise a larger round and stuff, right? In my second venture, the reason we outrightly went for an investor is what I mentioned, is because we needed that kind of runway, and we needed the understanding. And also unfortunately, the fact, Ayush, is that for young entrepreneurs in India, raising funds at a very early stage is slightly difficult. And even if you raise, you might get a very poor valuation for it. You might dilute a lot, and in the end, it hurts you, right? When you go for a Series F, Series G round, by the time you're reduced to such a small percentage that even if there is a huge acquisition happening, you don't end up making a lot of wealth, right? So in India, the early stage, as much as you can delay during the start of your venture, it is good. For us, people like us who were second-time entrepreneurs, we had a great exit in the past. For us, it makes sense, because the current investors also, the first thing they would do is they call up the previous investors and check about us, right? They would do a due diligence. And when they hear that, okay, these guys have done something good, then we kind of get that valuation and something that we expect, right? But for young entrepreneurs starting first time, delay fundraising as much as you can. The other advice I would have, is that, young entrepreneurs need to understand that at an angel round or maybe at a seed round, the investors are more keen on ownership. They're not keen on valuation. And what I mean by that, an investor might tell you that, look, if you are raising at a 6 crore valuation, I want 25%. If you are raising at a 12 crore valuation, I want 25%. So an angel's mindset is very driven by an ownership structure, that I want 25% of this company, right? So what typically first-time entrepreneurs end up doing is that they say, okay, I am raising 50 lakhs, right? And the investor says, great, I'll give you 50 lakhs. I want 25%, right? So your valuation becomes 2 CR. What smart entrepreneurs might end up doing is saying, okay, if you want 25%, I am going to raise 2 crores, right? And so for the same amount of dilution, the 25% dilution, you are raising a much bigger round, right? So then what happens is you don't have to worry about fundraising every 6 months, right? So my advice to everyone would be, these are tough times. Market is tough. There is a lot of people who had term sheets from investors were taken back because of the pandemic. The liquidity crunch might happen soon the moment things open up, right? So all entrepreneurs looking to raise funds, go for a bigger round. Have that elephant in your own backyard rather than leaving it at an investor side, and then every now and 6 months you go and say, give me something. Raise a bigger round, because end of the day, what matters is how much you're diluting. And your dilution at an early start round will remain the same, irrespective of how much you are raising, right? Because an investor knows that you will not dilute more than 30%. You know that an investor will not agree to something less than 20%, irrespective of whatever amount you are raising. So you always negotiate and settle in between 24 to 25%. So you pick up majority of early stage deals in India, any kind of segment, any sector, you will have a seed or an angel round where the dilution is between 24, 25%, irrespective of how much they have raised, right? So my advice I wish to everyone would be, go for a larger round, because things are going to get even tougher.
Yes, sir, it was quite genuine, and thank you for such an advice. It will be really helpful for us. So, what is your biggest learning from your startup experience at Hooliv and your previous startup that you would like to share with the budding entrepreneurs?
I think one thing I realized, Ayushi, is passion is overrated. People talk about passion. People talk about that anything you're doing is passion. You should be passionate. You should, be driving. Your passion should be driving it. I think passion is overrated. I'm not saying it's not required, but it's overrated. And I will tell you what I feel is the most important thing. That is discipline. Because when things are down, and more often than not in your startup, things will be down. The first thing that goes out of the window is passion. When you don't know how to pay the salaries of your people that you have hired, passion is of no help, but discipline is. And when I say discipline, Ayushi, it is discipline in each and every aspect that you do. We had a rule in our previous venture that any email that we receive from our clients, we will not reply to that email within the first 30 minutes. Because what happens, Ayushi, is when any customer sends a nasty email and you get to replying that as soon as you get it, your tone is going to be equally unprofessional. But if you just soak it in for 30 minutes, right, and then you start to replying that, you will have a very different reply, right? So, when I say discipline, these are the kind of small disciplines in everything. If discipline in terms of how you interact with your clients, discipline in terms of sending out the notes to your investors, even when the things are really, really bad, you need to maintain that discipline of sending them out that note and saying, hey, look, things are not looking good at my end. Because what happens otherwise, if you don't have that discipline and you don't send anything to your investors, 6 months later, when you go to them and say, hey, look, last 4 months have been terrible, they are like, why didn't you tell us before? Right? We could have helped you with some funds, or we could have done something, right? And then again, discipline with respect to how you're building your product, discipline with respect to how you interact with your colleagues. So for us, Ayushi, and I think maybe it varies from person to person, but for me, I would rate discipline much higher than passion. Passion is all good. Passion is all great for startup talks and sitting on the stage. But when the rubber hits the road, it's discipline which matters. That's what we have learned a lot. And I think I'll always keep going back, I should do the same thing, that be always humble. Never have a chip on your shoulder. Be always humble. And if you look at all the people who have achieved great successes, right from your Azim Premjis to Narayan Murthy's to even the Bansals, one common thing that you will find among all of them, even Warren Buffett for that matter, one common thing you will find among all of them is humility. Either it's the journey which makes them humble, or they have reached that place because they are so humble. But the key thing in every one of them is humility. So never lose that. Always be respectful of your opponents, your customers, your investors, and it pays back. You get paid back in the same coin. If you respect everyone, you get paid back in respect. So yeah, maybe those would be my 2 cents.
Yes, sir. That was really inspiring and
Sure.
a valuable experience and advice from your side. And we'll definitely keep that in mind.
Sure.
So, sir, here we finished with that Q&A round. Now, I would like to take the interview further. So, we have this again a new segment in our session. It's called rapid fire round. So here I will be giving you 2 options. So you have to choose any one of them, and you have to be a little quick
All right.
answering them.
All right.
Okay, so the first one is bootstrapping or venture capital. Bootstrapping. Okay. The second one is Mukesh Ambani or Ratan Tata.
Mukesh Ambani.
Okay. Scam 1992, the Harshad Mehta story, or Wolf of the Wall Street?
Scam 1992.
Okay. Quality of life or quantity of life?
Quality.
That was great. Quite quick also. Now I would like to take this round further, and I would be giving you one word, and you have to say what you have to speak up whatever first comes in your mind. So shall we begin?
Sure. Okay.
Yes. So the first word is fail.
Entrepreneurs never fail.
Wow. Okay. The next word is education system.
Needs a lot of reform and change.
Okay. Networking.
Is overrated.
Okay. That's it, sir. So it was a really great and inspiring session. So before ending this wonderful session, I would like to ask you one more question. What inspires you?
What inspires me? I think Ayushi, it's in the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of the people. In my first venture, we were in healthcare. We worked with a lot of bottom of the pyramid segment, and we were fortunate enough to make a difference to a lot of people's lives, their health. And I think the same principle is guiding me in my second venture also. And what we've also realized very well, Ayushi, is what we always also read in books is that never chase money, because if you're doing a good work, money follows. And that's precisely what happened in our first venture. We were very focused on bringing a meaningful difference to the lives of the people, and when we had an exit, we had a very good exit, and money followed us. And money was money was an add-on to everything that we were doing. And so is the second venture. We are trying to change the way students live. And of course, money is important. Money, everybody needs that, but that's not something that is driving us. So what inspires me is the ability to create value, ability to make a difference.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to learn from your amazing experiences. And it was really insightful and inspiring session. We really appreciate the enthusiasm with which you were answering all the questions.
Okay. Thanks, Ayushi. I know it's a wonderful initiative by you, your team, your entire institute. So I can wish you all the luck, and also do share my coordinates with any entrepreneur who wants to get in touch with me in any way that I can assist. I would be glad to. So
definitely,
keep this up. It's a wonderful initiative.
Thank you so much, sir. Definitely. Thank you for being a part of this session, and all the very best for your future entrepreneurship journey.
Thank you, Ayushi.